So in literature, in both your country and mine, they might call a pregnant woman a birthing person, or a
Correct.
chest feeder, or a menstruator,
Correct.
or a cervix haver.
Front hole. Person with a front hole. Thanks for talking to me today. And well, we were supposed to meet in Australia, in Sydney, but something happened. You got called away. What did happen, by the way?
I had literally had to leave New Zealand and return home in fear of my life. So that was quite a big thing. That was quite a good reason to come home.
So you can I ask you some personal questions?
Yes.
You have children. You have a husband and
Mhm.
children.
Yes.
So I mean, how are they handling all this?
Well, none of my kids, fortunately, were staying up that late. I mean, they're not massively interested in what their mother does. They support me and
How
everything, but
old?
they're not 14 to 21. So my oldest is 21, my youngest is 14. And
Okay.
I've yeah, three girls and three boys and a girl. Don't want to misgender them so early in the conversation. Um,
So were
but
they? I mean, how are they handling all this?
we're not so. My youngest really doesn't want to know anything about it. Um, I sort of think I forget because I survived, because I came home. I forget, but my husband was watching it. And
Uh,
he didn't realize I was going to go live a little bit early. So he was trying to catch up with the beginning kind of minutes. And then all he could see on the live stream were expletives and people going, "Oh my God, is she okay? Is she going to get out?" And so, yeah, I think he was quite shaken by the whole thing.
and how are you doing with it? I mean, how are
I think
you
I'm
internally
fine.
with all this?
Um, my mission, my mission has
Because
always been to let as many people as
it's
know as possible,
yeah.
and that's
I mean,
happened.
look, it's designed to accord you the maximum emotional distress possible. That's the whole
Yeah.
intent of it. It's to punish, is to torment, is to make you suffer. That's the price that they would. Among the prices, of course, I'm sure they would prefer a greater price had they had their opportunity. But emotionally, you're okay and your family's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's an act of, an act of terrorism and a long line of sort of terrorist tactics that these trans activists, so-called trans activists, actually use. But no, I feel relatively defiant. Just put one foot in front of the other. I genuinely did think that I was not going to get out alive. And I was more worried about being hurt than being killed, if you know what I mean. Um,
I do.
and I just put one foot in front of the other, and then I had to have protection, even in the police station. Not everybody was allowed to know where I was and who I was and if I was there at all. So it was a real need to know basis. And then I was in police protection until my plane took off, and they stayed at the airport until that plane left the runway.
And did you feel? I mean, how did you feel? Did you feel that they were genuinely trying to protect you and they wanted you to not be hurt?
I think the individual officers, and a lot of them, I mean, I'm nearly 50 now, so I think that's what happens when you get to this age. Everybody looks really young. So all the police officers look really young, and they were very sweet. And clearly, there was an operational decision way up the food chain that meant that those police officers did not come where women were being injured and terrorized. But the individuals were lovely.
Okay, so I started off with the assumption that people have an idea of what happened to you, but Reed, we might have to shoot this out of order. So let's do this. Let's take a step back and
Yes.
just take a couple of minutes. And so I'll rephrase the question. So could you take a couple of minutes and explain what happened to you in Australia and New Zealand?
Mm. So I do events called Let Women Speak that literally are about enabling women to speak by creating an event. It's outdoor because often when I've tried to do these events indoor, people cancel and they won't host us. So it's just about free speech events for women to come and talk specifically about the threat of transgenderism and transgender cult and the erosion of safeguarding around children. So they'll come and talk about their lives, and there's no order. It's really, really grassroots. Um, There's no order. It's completely random. There's no plan and there's no agenda. So it's just whatever women want to say on that day. Sometimes they don't plan. Sometimes they come with big speeches. And we took it around Australia, and I started getting defamed by politicians as a Nazi. And then that really caused a frenzy. But New Zealand, I think, has limited news anyway. And so they'd started, I was like the most terrible person ever. Before I got there, there was a high court case trying to stop me from being able to enter the country. And then all of this culminated, this sort of seventh event on my tour, or eighth event on my tour, was in Auckland, New Zealand, where I arrived to a mass of 2,000 very angry, supposed trans rights activists or Rainbow Brigade community, the be kind, peaceful, loving mob of violent activists. And they tried to.
So, yeah, they mobbed you, and it was an ugly scene. They didn't merely threaten you with physical violence. Physical violence was, but just 30 seconds, just real quick, just guide us through that so people know what happened. Like, how did that set the scene for us? And we'll put in some video in that as well.
Okay. So I was in something called a bandstand. So we arrive at a park, and in the center of the park is this bandstand. And I've got a team of 7 security. And so what we do is we go all the way through it. And then when I get in there, I realize there's no police. And there's supposed to be police. And the metal fences, within minutes, they'd push down the metal fences, this 2,000 mob, screaming about stomp a Nazi, Posie Parker is a Nazi. There's only one good Nazi is a dead Nazi. That, you know, all this stuff all around, how I'm a transphobe and hateful, and I should be silenced. And they're screaming, and it's a frenzied mob which has a life of its own. And then they just start getting closer and closer and closer. Women are getting assaulted. My security team said, right, the police aren't coming. Like, we've been waiting for the police, and they're like, they're not coming, which is something I've only heard in a movie, like the police aren't coming. And it was really like, okay. And I'm 5'1". So I get in the middle of this group of people, which are 7 security guards and the stewards that are voluntary, like women that just want to facilitate speeches. And then we just charge through this crowd. And within seconds, they're trying to push me over to the floor. And that's the point at which I just thought, if I go down, I'm never getting up. I just won't get up. I'll be a blob on the floor and easy to kick and stamp on. And
okay, so let's unpack for a sec. So, what views do you hold, and what views do they think you hold? Because those are not commensurate, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what views do you hold? And within that, I really want to drill down on this because I think that this is a fundamental source of confusion.
Mm-hmm.
When you tell me what views you hold, tell me your definition of a woman, and I want to unpack that.
Okay, so my definition of a woman is an adult human female. That's it. No.
And what do you mean by female? I got the adult human because this is another.
I mean, the biological sex that doesn't always, but can produce ova. You know, biologically female.
Okay. So what are you saying, and what do they think you're saying?
I think they might be the same thing. I'm saying that only adult human females are women and deserve to be under the umbrella of women's rights. And they think that if you say that you're a woman, if you feel like you're a woman, whether you've got a penis or not, you are a woman. So they think I'm erasing trans women. Okay,
so we need to unpack this because I do believe this is where a lot of confusion comes in. You are not saying that if someone wants to undergo top or bottom surgery, they should not do that.
I'm saying that I would like,
provided they're above the age of 18.
Well, I don't know if I agree with 18 actually, because I think we know that the brain isn't fully developed till about the age of 25, 27.
Oh,
But
wow.
people are
Okay.
allowed to do all sorts of. Amanda Jane Blakemore does some studies on it about the end of adolescence. So I would prefer it if at 18 you would maybe have 3 years of really intense therapy to try and unearth what it is that has made you disassociate from your
Okay.
body, because it's not real. So I would think, yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So I'm just trying to make this clear. So, okay. So you don't oppose, in principle, somebody who has undergone, provided they're, and I'll just set the age at 18 for the moment. I don't
Okay.
want to get too granular on it. So you're not opposed to men wearing dresses, women wearing slacks. You're not opposed to people presenting as a certain gender. Is that correct?
I'm not opposed to anything that anybody wants to do in their lives that doesn't impact upon mine and my rights and my spaces and my safety. So, of course, a man wants to wear a dress, that's fine. I think it would be foolish not to pretend that I don't know, or to pretend that I don't know that most men wearing dresses is for a fetish. So I'd prefer not to be involved in somebody's sexual fetish. But again, if it doesn't impact me, I don't care.
Okay. So what you are opposed to is you're opposed to men in women's spaces, prisons, rape crisis shelters,
Yeah.
sports. Is that correct?
Yes, and alongside that, I don't like altering language that describes women in order to not offend those men, and I don't like language that is reserved for women to be used by or for those men. So I don't
Okay.
do pronouns
Let's
and
go over
that
that.
sort of stuff.
All right, let's go over that because I think that's really important. So, what language are you talking about? What words are you talking about specifically?
So, for example, the word woman is only for adult human females. Nobody else gets to use that word woman. They can in their own lives, so I shouldn't be compelled by the state to do it. Um, and I also think it is a thin end of the wedge argument. So, she, her pronouns, that's just for women. The word woman, the word female. And then other from the other side, there's an attack on how we describe women. So, in literature, in both your country and mine, they might call a pregnant woman a birthing person, or a chest
Correct.
feeder, or a menstruator, um,
Correct.
or a cervix
Front
haver.
front
So,
hole. Person with a front hole.
yeah, I mean, that's just romance for you. It's just so disgusting, just so repulsive.
Okay. So I'm trying to work something out in my life, and so maybe I'll ask you some advice if that's okay.
Yes, go on.
So yeah, thanks. So I have been using, and then I'll tell you my view about the whole thing, and you can correct my thinking if it's an error or just make some suggestions. So I agree with you in terms of I think there should be an age of transition. I don't think children should be allowed to transition. I agree with Abigail Schreier that that's irreversible damage. I think it's a contagion. I agree with Colin Wright, many of these things. I am opposed to biological men and women's spaces, prisons, sports, rape crisis shelters, etc. With all that being said, in what do you think about this? What's your opinion about this? And then give me some advice. Give me your best argument if I'm right or wrong. If I am with somebody like at the University of Austin, I had dinner with Deidre McCluskey. Not sure if you're familiar with Deidre McCluskey, but born biological male, transitioned to a female. Actually had a really fascinating conversation with Deidre, and I used Deidre's preferred pronoun, which is she. Was I wrong to do that? What do you think about that?
Okay. When did you use that pronoun? Were you in the company of that person?
Yeah, I was having dinner with Deidre, and there was one other person there.
Okay. So you had calls to speak about Deirdre in front of them.
Yes.
Okay. What you want to do in that situation, and however you feel is polite, is up to you. I wouldn't. I'm just not giving up a tiny little inch on this argument. I just wouldn't. Um, but if you want to do that, that's
And it's
fine.
okay. So and is the reason you wouldn't because you think if you do that, the dominoes will fall and they'll be accorded. For example, the society will have to yield certain domains and spaces. Is that the reason?
I think look, pronouns are but there's a really good essay called Pronouns Are a Hypnol. And it's all about once you start using she, her, it becomes
Yeah.
more difficult to police the boundaries in which you want to keep men out. So when your friend wanted to use the bathroom, for example, and I would say that I
Deidre
don't
did
care.
go to the woman's room.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I think I don't think that's his right at all. Their right at all to use a woman's space. I think it's just patently wrong. Um, but it would be much more difficult to have a conversation if I'd already said she, her. What am I going to say? She can't go to the women's bathroom. It just becomes a more difficult thing to police. If we just accept that some men want to present in a way that is stereotypically female and use female language and names and so on, which I don't, um, I just, I just don't want them in our space, and I don't want to start eroding our
Yeah,
boundaries at all.
eroding. Yeah, eroding was the word that was going through my mind. And okay, all right. So, is it possible to transition from one sex to the other?
No, not at all. No.
And the reason for that is that it's sex is biological.
Sex is biological, 100%. The reason I am who I am is because of my physical body. There is no separation. I'm not a theist. There is no sort of transubstantiation. I don't think that we are separate to our bodies. I think we are our bodies. And so therefore, no, of course, you can't change sex.
Okay. Should the this is something I've been thinking about. Help me out here. um, should the concept of gender be used at all?
No. I think it's a poison. I think it's a ridiculous poison. Sex stereotypes are one thing, if we want to talk about that women typically do something or men typically do something, although it's apparently really old fashioned and suddenly we don't realize that there are any differences. And well, we all bloody well know there's plenty of differences between men and women broadly. But no, I think gender is a concept where you're going down the route of we have souls. I mean, it's just like, where is gender? Like, is it? I was really good at maths at school, and I loved cars, and I can still fix an engine,
Oh, that's
and yet I
impressive.
wear makeup. Not that well, but I can do stuff. I fix the stuff in my house. My husband's an amazing cook, but he's like 6 foot and built massively, and I'm
Yeah,
5 foot
my
and
dad
I'm
was an
very
amazing
thin.
cook too. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
So those roles. So I've often thought in the 1950s, or at least the way that I've envisioned it from what I've read, the man had his job, the woman had her job, and divorce was nowhere near as common. But when there was, it was that someone broke that social contract. Like the man's
Mm,
job was to bring home the money, the woman worked in the domestic sphere, and then people have had to navigate those realities. And I think for I know that I've been guilty of this. I think I still carry the vestiges of that. So I had certain gendered expectations, even though, it, yeah, I guess it's complicated because I don't know what I'm so steeped in gender. I'm not even sure what I know the world would look like absent it.
well, I mean, so I use biology. I use the word sex. I don't use the word gender at all. I find gender is a really difficult concept to grapple with and get hold of. And I don't know where sex ends and gender begins. So I just think it's
Yeah,
better to say it doesn't exist. In 2010, I was interviewed for the Times when I was like nobody knew my name, and I was
yeah,
interviewed about the way I raise my kids. And
yeah,
my
yeah. It's a good
boys
question.
were allowed pushchairs, and they were allowed babies, and they were allowed kitchens. And my daughter didn't want any of those things. She was the first girl after 2 boys. So she was very much, her identity was actually being different to her older brothers. And she was different. You know, she was really different. She's also my child least likely to have ever cried at school out of my 3 kids.
Do you think, do you think boys and girls should be raised differently?
No, I think you raise them the same. Like, my kids are all relatively stoic. Actually, to be fair, Peter, I don't think it matters how much you raise, how you raise them. I think they're kind of born almost ready-made, and then you just help guide them.
There's some literature on that lends itself to that conclusion, particularly with regard to personalities. So I want to ask you about something that I find deeply disturbing, and it was the way that you were portrayed in the press. But rather than ask you about that directly, so I do street epistemology. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but basically I go around the world and I ask people what they believe, why they believe what they believe. And I do this everywhere. I've done it in the prisons. I do this in crowded public universities, in the streets, everywhere. And somebody came up to me and my buddy Reed, who's in the room here, when we were in Sydney, and they talked about you. And nice. I would love to play that clip for you. And without further ado, Reed.
Wow.
2 days ago, I would be over there.
2 days ago?
Mm-hmm.
What happened in the last 2 days?
Well, some women got together to speak in Melbourne. And I know some of these women. I know we're not Nazis. We're mostly left-wing. That said, it's an incredibly broad church. There's women from all sides of politics. And they just got together to talk about the reality of what self-sex ID laws, which we're about to get in New South Wales, but they were they're very entrenched in Melbourne. And these women got together to just talk about the effects of that on their lives. How, and I'm not going to go into it because it's not about that. Well, I will actually.
Posie Parker,
yep, bringing it out, and she really lifted a rock, and I saw what's slithering underneath, because I saw the way constantly these pro-women, women's rights activists have just been defamed.
Called Nazis.
And called Nazis. Just because
because they don't want...
Yeah, well, because also it was a protest about women not wanting men in women's changing rooms, in their single-sex spaces, in their prisons, in their sexual assault and domestic violence crisis centres, and not wanting gay kids to be sterilised to fit to some sort of regressive gender conform ideas.
And how did the media portray that?
Well, the women were branded as Nazis. It's absolutely flabbergasting. It is so untrue. Firstly, they said we're anti-trans, which we're not. We're pro-women. But also because some asshole goose-stepping
in the background,
turned up on the sidelines, the media jumped on that and went, see, Nazis. It's like, I can watch it with my own eyes. I know these women, some of these women, mostly electronically, some of them in person. So to see that...
They don't hate Jews?
No, surprisingly not, yeah. And I should tell my grandmother, my dead grandmother, I'm sorry. Turns out that I don't hate you. Yeah, to see that and to see how it affected a cause that I think is incredibly worthy, and to see how it was framed deliberately, I believe. So to see that really changed my mind. I now realise that no, there is a paucity of good Australian journalism.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you what you think about that in a second, but let us be absolutely, positively, unequivocally crystal clear. You have absolutely nothing to do with white supremacy. You are not a Nazi. You are not a neo-Nazi. You do not hate Jews. That is insane.
It's so insane. It's so insane that anyone has to, but you have to defend yourself against that. But yeah, unequivocally, I absolutely abhor it. Sad. I associate anybody with that ideology in 2023. Like FYI, the Nazis did lose. I mean, it's not exactly a winning ideology, but like just sad, pathetic men.
Yeah, it's a repugnant, disgusting smear that you and myself, of course,
Yeah, of course.
that you have been painted with. So I want to talk about the way the media lied, the way, and I do use the media as a plural noun in that sense, as a singular noun. I want to talk about the way that you were portrayed and your response to that, given the claim that's absolutely fucking outrageous.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, look, I've watched that footage so we did an event in Melbourne and we were stood on some steps. We actually couldn't. I thought they were Antifa because I was told that they were in black
Yeah.
clothing with black masks, and that would be common sort of black bloc Antifa, which we do get protests. But there were numerous groups there that day. And so we didn't see them. And I won't go into too much because people can look up what actually happened. But those men were then marched in front of the trans rights activists. Now, if I was orchestrating something to discredit women, I wouldn't march those Nazis past those women to do their salute, because then the women are going to interact. And then you're going to see some really negative faces and expressions, and probably they're going to get told to off. And you would see that from the women, but we don't get to see that. The media doesn't get to see that. And the media are big fat liars. But
So
politicians,
why do they do that? Like, okay, walk me through it. Clearly false.
yes,
Obviously a smear. Why
yes.
do they do that?
They did it because Moira Deeming, the MP, had recently given her maiden speech where she talked about child safeguarding and women's rights. So she's definitely
They're trying
a
to
threat
kick
to
her out
the
now.
narrative. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, she's.
The Liberal
I
Party.
think.
Okay. Why do
I
they
think this
do
was
that
a
to
leader.
you? Like, okay, so, but why? Like, okay, is it, and maybe you don't have the answer, and it's totally reasonable if you have the answer to this, like, but if you have a speculation as to why someone who doesn't want men in women's prisons is a Nazi, like, it's too bad these people don't have conversations with woke people, because I would love someone to draw that line for me. Draw the line for me for how someone does not want a man in a woman's prison, line Nazi. Draw a line for how, go ahead.
Okay, so I fundamentally believe that this is a quasi-religious dogmatic cult, and therefore it's a little bit like Scientology. It's a little bit like any cult. You cannot question any aspect of the narrative or the belief system, because then it all comes down. If you say that men can't be in women's prisons, then you basically say that 16-year-old with gender dysphoria that's keeps abusing their parents.
You're also saying that the society that we've built for hundreds of years, and a society, your society, the island people too, like the whole thing, and all of Western civilization were completely populated by Nazis even before they were Nazis, and even up until 10 years ago.
Yeah, but you're relying on reason.
It's totally insane.
But you're relying on linear thinking and reason, and they're not. Then that's not how they think. They're bound by emotion and instability, and so they can't give you any logic. Like we had a girl in Canberra, and she started off talking about male violence, and specifically about male violence against Indigenous women in Australia, which is very high. And she talked about that, and then she started talking about, we can't leave our trans sisters, meaning men. And then I was like, okay. Let me just ask you then. So I just stopped her because I'd let her speak. It's called let women speak, so that they are allowed to speak even with stupid views. So I just said, okay, all right, let me just ask you this. My 16-year-old daughter is in a female changing room. Tell me why she is now expected to be okay with seeing an adult male penis. And she's like, swings back to the mic and she said, oh, statistically. And I went, no, we're talking about the consequences of your ideology. Tell me why my daughter. And she went, oh, you're just all hateful. So they just can't question any of it.
Okay, so let's back up. So the claim that you're hateful is far more understandable to me than the claim that you're a Nazi. That's a very specific kind of claim. I remember I put on Twitter once that we need to reel in Nazi, the semantic range of Nazi. Everyone's a Nazi. Like that's it. People are just capriciously using the term Nazi to smear, defame, defile, or do reputationally assault somebody. The sad thing is, it's so obviously idiotic that alone should discredit whatever somebody is saying. That alone, just the use of that term in that way should instantly discredit someone. Okay, so
yeah, it should.
So the media. So the media is painting you. So because these bogans, this is a term, these rednecks or whatever, these neo-Nazis were in the background, they're linking you by kind of geographical proximity. They're assuming that there's some ideological similarity because these lunatics are in the ground, given the Hitler salute. To me, that is and if you could comment on this, I'd appreciate it. To me, that is a profound corruption. That is a profound, pervasive media corruption.
This is true. That's bad in itself. But let me I'm just going to talk you through why I think Nazi has become a something. So first of all, you say they're going to commit suicide. Like if you don't let a child transition, they'll commit suicide. That's a false claim.
That's
they may
not true. That's
suicide.
been debunked.
Yeah. And obviously suicide ideation is something that 10 years ago we would not have promoted. Well, now apparently it's fair game. So then you've got suicide. Now suicide, if you're going to cause people suicide, you're going to cause a genocide. And once you say genocide, you then quickly move over to Nazi. So I think it's not logical for normal people.
That's interesting.
That is how you can do it.
Wow, that's really that's a remarkable linguistic stretch. Okay. I'll need to process.
It's not mine. It's not mine. No, I know. It comes from.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's just this whole thing is, it's just telling Reed, this whole thing is just so stupid. It's like I'd much rather be spending my time on something interesting and productive. This whole thing is just so utterly insane. Okay.
But human behavior, though, human nature, I think it's fascinating. I mean, it might be annoying and stupid and ridiculous, and like, how do you even combat such illogical thinking? But in another way, like, how do you, once you convince someone that a woman has a penis, all bets are off as to what you can actually convince them to do. You can lock them in their homes for like a year on end and watch their economies collapse, and they will still do it.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if that's a first domino or a domino, but it does seem to me that there's a profound lack of reasoned, thoughtful argument. And that's the other thing. That's the other reason that those who traffic in the ideology don't want to talk. It's the way or converse with people with whom they disagree. It's the ideology has a built-in mechanism to keep it in place. It's it's just truly so stupid that it has to build in safeguards to prevent anybody from questioning it, because even one or two, they don't even have to be Socratic questions, one or two basic questions, and the whole edifice will crumble. So it has to have some way to prevent itself from being dislodged. Okay, so we have another video of the same woman, and I want you to notice when you watch this, I don't know how much you can see in this video, but she's literally trembling. She's so upset when she talks. Take it away, Reed.
I just want to point out, you're talking about being frightened. If you look at every single lamppost in this park, it is a flag that has co-opted the gay and lesbian rainbow flag and has turned it into something completely different. And it's terrifying. I'm terrified. This is the first time I've come out from behind a Twitter handle. I've done to speeches and stuff, nothing that's videoed, but it's terrifying. I also work in the arts, and I have trans women friends whom I love deeply. And if they saw this, they may think, oh, she doesn't see me as a person, and I do. I just see you as a trans woman, not as a woman. So it's terrifying. I'm terrified that I'm going to lose my job over this, over saying that a woman is an adult human female and no man can be a woman.
We can blur your face out.
Nah, fuck it. I'm over it.
So we can blur your face out. No, fuck it. I'm over it. That's the attitude that everybody needs to have, because we have a small group of quasi-religious maniacs running around, destroying the institutions, holding everybody hostage, smearing everybody as Nazis, capturing main institutions, or even things like Wikipedia, which is another story, College of Education, engines of knowledge production, judiciaries, holding everybody hostage. And that attitude is exactly what we need. We need people to come forward, not be afraid to show their faces, to speak openly and honestly about something that is clearly false.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't have that conviction. There must have been a time years ago, before most of us knew what was happening, where people were in rooms where this nonsense was being first sort of planted, and they had a choice back then to say no and raise questions, and they chose not to. And I think it will be interesting to trace it back to where that began. Like we had conversations in our parliament in the 90s about putting men in women's prisons, like with this Gender Recognition Act that they began to talk about, which is where you can legally lie and pretend that you are the opposite sex. I mean, in your country, I think there's one state where you can be put down as the biological parents of a child, and you can both be women. Now, I'm all for, like, everybody have a loving family home. I don't care whether you're straight, gay, bisexual. I don't care. But that baby has a right to know who their parents are. So there's all types of kind of looking after people's feelings and not really giving a shit about what is true. And it's time that we all
that's true. Truth is no longer the North Star of institutions. Truth is no longer the North Star of people's lives. It's shifted to something. Konstantin Kisin, my friend, also from your island there, put out a nice little tweet that said something like, paraphrasing, why is it that someone needs to do a study to figure out why once offenders see the inside of a courtroom, they become transgender instantly, male offenders. So there are people exploiting and gaming the system, and maybe some points of a disagreement that we have are, I think if somebody has undergone bottom surgery and has been on drugs, has undergone a psychological supervision for years, is of a certain age, certainly over 18. We can quibble whether or not that should be 21, but I think a conversation needs to be had there. Oh, here's the tweet. Have there been any studies on why seeing the inside of a courtroom seems attractive for sex offenders? I mean, doesn't that just say 80% of the problem? It's so crazy, and then everybody else just buys into this. Oh well, this person is all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Again,
I mean, why would a convicted rapist want to go to a women's prison? Why?
I don't know. It's total backfire. But it is something. So here's what's crazy about that. What's crazy about that is that everybody else buys into it. That's the crazy thing. It's not. Well, yeah. Well, enough people buy into it so that they are sent to women's prisons. Enough people buy into it so that 13-year-old girls are getting mastectomies. Enough people buy into it so that we are creating problems in society that simply all of the evidence accords to the idea that these are self-generated problems that have worked their way up as social contagions in society, particularly among young adolescent females. I mean, but
I don't agree that they buy into it at all. I believe that people want to save their own skin and couldn't really care about other people. That's what I think. I don't think people in Ministry of Justice in this country actually look at a male sex offender and say, well, he is a woman. I just think they think, We don't care. We don't want to get sued. We don't care about the women.
Okay, so I think I disagree because enough people care so that they end up in women's prisons. Enough people buy into it and are cowards. They don't want to come out and say this is insane. This is a man who is a rapist who clearly should not be in a woman's prison. But they can because it continues to happen. Andrew Doyle, also on your island, is a friend of mine. He has talked about this fairly extensively. All right, let me change the let me change the conversation for a minute. So we've queued up another clip that I'd like you to watch, please. Reed and I were in Puerto Rico, and I'd like you to watch this and let me know what you think. Okay, so the best definition of a man is you have three choices. Is it an adult human male, an adult human that is masculine, or any adult that identifies as a man? You have three choices. The best definition of a man is an adult human male, an adult human that is masculine, or any adult that identifies as a man. Which do you think?
The second one?
An adult human that is masculine.
Yes, sir.
But yet you wouldn't date a woman. You wouldn't date. Okay.
The first for me?
An adult human male.
Yeah. The first.
Adult human male.
Same like here.
Adult human male.
3.
Any adult that identifies as a man.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you my read on that, and then you give me your read. So my read is that this shows the consequences of how wokeness confuses people. That's my read on this.
Yeah. Well, look, they're teenagers. They look like teenagers. Would that be fair? Young adults?
No,
so-
everybody in these recordings has to be over 18 unless their parents are.
Okay.
They're all over 18.
Okay.
By
They
law.
looked under 25. I'm just trying to pitch them where they've been to when they've been to school, because I think this has been indoctrinated in schools. So therefore,
Correct. This is so. Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
that's all right. It's all right. I'm a woman. It happens all the time. I'm joking. So the indoctrination has been in schools for a long time, and actually this social suicide that these children commit is so much worse and pervasive, because actually you can commit it online at home. You can do it in WhatsApp groups and be ostracized. So the stakes are a lot higher. I could have an opinion that was different to all of my friends. In fact, I probably still would, because I'm a little bit bloody minded. But I could have a different view to all of my friends, and I could just say something at school when I was 14, 15. The teacher wouldn't get involved. So if I had a view on a political view, the teacher wouldn't be getting involved telling me I was wrong. The state wouldn't be getting involved telling me I was wrong. And then my friends could all just disagree with me. And then the next day we'd go in and nobody would talk about it and be fine and we'd move on. Well, they don't have that anymore. So therefore, when they're told that it's unkind, especially females, when they're told it's unkind to say that somebody isn't, whatever it is that they say that is, it's a lot more difficult to do. So a lot of these girls are just going along with this, and then we've got the feminization of boys. I think there's something dodgy about that. But yeah, so but I agree with you that nobody is allowed to just say what is in front of them, and because we're just telling them it's all subjective.
Okay, two things. One, why did you say especially females? You think females are more susceptible to this?
I think females are far more likely to adhere to the norms and rules of the social group than boys. And be ostracized. Women are covert. We do psychological warfare. We ostracize people. We don't just say to someone, I really think you're rude. I'd really rather you didn't do that. We don't we call it banter in the UK. We don't like have real sort of cruel teasing amongst women, because women get really upset. I'm quite good at it. I don't mind it at all. I think as long as it's funny, you can say what the hell you like about me. But boys do it all the time. That's like the way that boys like find their pecking order, is just in constant teasing and ribbing. Just women just don't do it.
Yeah, I don't know the literature on that. and I'm trying to just think from my lived experience if that rings true. So I think what you said is spot on, that we know that the educational system buttresses this and actually encourages this derangement. We know that, and I think it was also, it depends on what year one graduated from school. And we do know that younger people are more susceptible ideologically to this and more susceptible to trends. So, okay. So I guess I have a question for you as I try to think through this. There's a lot going on here. So my question for you is, let me just check in. How are you doing? You doing okay?
I'm great. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Thanks.
Cool. So what do we do about this?
We inject truth and rationality back into the classroom. We get rid of activist teachers. I mean, I went to my kid's school and it was a Canadian teacher, and I said, "Oh, what made you get into teaching?" She goes, "Social justice." And I just went, "Pardon?" She said, "Social justice." And I said, "No, the reason you get into teaching is to educate children." And she said, and then we talked about the LGBT, because I talk about, I go in and I demand to see what my kids are being taught. And then often the answer is, no, you're not doing that. Absolutely, categorically, no way, you're not doing that. But yeah, we get activists out of the classroom. We bring back education to teaching. No more circle times, no more kumbaya. Let's all be nice. Let's just teach children to be nice and principled through osmosis and good behavior of adults and hierarchy in a school.
Getting rid of activist teachers is it is fundamentally compatible with liberalism. You have people, so this is, one of my shticks. I don't want to ride this hobby horse for too long, but the educational system is predicated upon the Brazilian, at least in the United States and most of the Anglosphere, predicated upon Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed, which is teaching to liberate others from oppression. He was a Brazilian educator.
Jesus.
Yeah. So we know that colleges of education, this is ubiquitous, not only taught as a text, but it is the underlying principles of the ideology are forwarded over truth. So these institutions are no longer truth seeking. So I agree with you in principle that the problem is when we have activist educators going into the school systems, and these are not one-offs. This is the value. These are the values that they're being taught. The demeaning of truth, the demeaning of discourse, the demeaning of dialogue based upon or predicated upon corrupt bodies of scholarship. Given that this is just so pervasive, I don't know how realistic it is to say that we need to get rid of activist teachers, given that all the teacher accreditation programs have been ideologically corrupted.
Fair point.
So I have my own idea about what to do with this. Homeschooling, by the way, has gone up dramatically in the last few years. If anything positive came about as a result of the pandemic, it's that people realized what their children were actually learning in schools, and then they withdrew their kids in their homeschooling. I have a very good friend of mine who's with homeschooling 3 children. His son is deaf, so he takes his son to a deaf school, but they're homeschooling their daughters, and they don't have to worry about any kind of ideological corruption. And I'm not saying that that's a solution for everybody. I personally could not have homeschooled my children, but I think that the impulse is correct in K through 12 education. What else? Okay, let me take a step back. What do you think we can do about this?
Well, I think you're right. If I was in America, I certainly rip my kids out of school immediately. From what I've heard, it's horrendous. I think the government has to be strong. I mean, that's a big ask for your government and mine. We've had a conservative government since, like a flat out conservative government majority since 2015. And this stuff has just continued. And they've been in power since 2010, but they were coalition. And they've just allowed this stuff. I mean, this is not conservative. Maybe you just have to put some sort of statutory no more of this crap in the classroom. I think this has to come from the state. this is the problem, right? Ideologies come and go. People do stupid things, believe in stupid things, and live pretty stupid lives. But the state has never gone, yeah, we agree with that. Let's push this through everything. Let's in the United Kingdom, if you get arrested by a man who calls himself a woman, even if he's only done it for the last month, and he wants to intimately search me as a female suspect, he's allowed to do that. Like border force agents, they are allowed to search female suspects, and interrogate females if they just stick a dress on. And I've had email communication from women who work in that in those departments, and some of the men don't even come across as even like AGPs, or they probably are autogynephiles, but they will put metal in their pocket, and then their female colleagues have to pat them down as if they've got a vulva instead of a penis. So this stuff is really nuts.
Okay. And so if we're trying to figure out how do we get out of this mess, right? So you, me, we're sitting down, people listening to this thinking, okay, this is a mess, it's a disaster on multiple levels. What do I do about it? So maybe on a systems-wide level, we agree, I don't know how practical it is, but I think we both agree about activist teachers. What does the guy in, I don't know if you're familiar with U.S. states, but, Missouri or something, on Idaho, which on a tractor and a potato farmer or what have you, his kid's in school, he's trying to make sense of this. He's confused. His wife is confused. His husband, who's ever confused. And they're thinking like, wow, okay, I know this is a problem. What do we do about it?
First of all, you can go into your school board and you can get rid of, in America, you have access to sort of school boards where you can vote people
Correct.
out. So I think you do that. You maybe get up a class action to get boys out of girls' sports and changing rooms, and you support people that are actually using some of those initiatives. So you will have different campaign groups in America or different court cases. And you look to them closely and you see how you can assist if they're in your state. And if they're not, then you begin one yourself. You have to be, if change is needed, if not now, then when, and if not you, then who. It really does come to individuals eventually, where you can't sit there and say, I don't like it, there's nothing I can do. There's always something you can do. So school boards, mind who you vote for. You might have to take a bit of a hit in another area just to get truth back in. So if you're
I've thought about
Democrat,
that too. Yeah.
You might have to vote Republican. As long as somebody says, I know what a woman is, and I'm willing to stop the sterilization of children, I think you have to go for that politician. And it might be that everyone takes a 25 cents on the dollar pay cut. I don't know what it might take, but I can't think of anything more important. I said this before. The feminists absolutely love that I've said this, but I definitely think that in the short term, reproductive freedom is something I think is worth sacrificing in order to stop cutting up kids' bodies. And fundamentally, like, if you can't stand upon truth, what the hell what can you do with anything? You can't do anything if you don't know what the truth is. You can't, it's like building the old parable, building a house upon the sand. There's nothing works if you can't tell the truth. And we are in an information war. Like this is where we are, where you've got like people with interest and billions lying to us, and nobody's even asking why. In fact, most people don't even recognize it. And so, yeah, you just have to vote for the truth, and then you can deal with the other stuff later. And the other stuff, really, in comparison, is nothing. The right, and I say that as a woman who is totally pro-choice. Sorry, I got a bit ranty. Sorry.
No, I mean you've got me thinking about it. Is no, you have me thinking. For years it was people would vote on one issue in the United States, at least. They would vote on whether or not someone was pro-life or pro-choice. Now the landscape is cloudy, it's murky, it's more confusing. Somebody a very close friend of mine, moves in the public space, said to me, if you're not willing to cross the aisle, you're part of the problem. And I think you're right. You will have to give up certain things. And I'm not even saying that this, for me personally, is my main issue, because it's not. I think that this is a manifestation of a larger civilizational sickness. We could talk about that. But I think when we talk about how to deal with this, actionable items are good. So I like the idea of going to a school board. You know, many of these activists will show up. There'll only be 5-10 people in person. Recently, that's changing. You know, very recently in the last year, that's changed. But very few people will go to these. So show up, I think, and I don't mean just send emails. I mean physically show up to these meetings. There is something about counteracting and there's a process. There's the democratic process. So people showing up to these things, it's participatory, and that's what makes our democracy work. So, do
Not
you have
just
anything
mums.
else you want to? Yeah.
Well, not just mums. I think I think men have. Look, I talk about this a lot. How there is, I don't know a single woman who hasn't been in a space. It's a female-only space, and they hear a male voice, and you basically freeze. So you'll hold your breath, or you'll breathe very quietly, because until that threat has gone, you know not to breathe. Now, I believe in something. I believe in like your DNA just doesn't carry kind of how to build your body, but it will. The reason we have instinct is because we are informed by our past lives, not as in people that came before us. Not like I think I was Cleopatra, but you know, DNA just it's got to work like that, right? It's got to have some sort of legacy of trauma, and we know that children born who were eggs through trauma will carry some sort of legacy of trauma. So we know that those things exist. So that's what I think. And so women, we know this. We as women know this, and men don't get it because men don't experience it in the kind of same casual way that all women do.
Yeah, I think that's
And
right.
so
Yeah.
men don't quite get it, and that's great, because I don't want men to be sniveling wrecks, right? If I'm upset, which doesn't happen very often, but I don't want my husband to join in. I'm quite happy that he's not going to start crying it just because I'm crying, right? So I think men have to get involved. Unfortunately, your voices, however much I would like this not to be true, are taken far more seriously in every aspect of public life. So it's got to be men that go to those school boards as well as women. But, you know, men are going to have to step up and start helping, because if good men don't step up and start helping, then nefarious men who have other ambitions of authoritarianism, but maybe from a different side, they'll be the ones that come and step up, and then we're all doomed. It's a light note to finish, I feel.
Yeah. I can't help but to think that at base is a theme that just keeps repeating itself: a homophobia, a misogyny. I can't help but to think that these are somehow timeless themes that they're now masquerading as different things, but that's really what they are. Did you see, by the way, what's her name? Drew Barrymore on her knees? Did you
Yes,
see
I
that?
did. Yeah.
With Devin Mulvaney. What did you think of that?
I think it's a performative kind of self-flagellation. I think how many other guests has she got on her knees for?
I don't know. I don't watch the show.
No, who could?
I mean, is that so? I'm really trying to, like, she's on her knees, and
There's
that's a
always a trade-off. What's she trading there?
Devin
What's she get?
Mulvaney. That is, I'm even hesitant to say that's a man, because I don't want to make anybody's life more complicated or worse. I do believe that anybody should be able to live any kind of life they want. And there is something so remarkable about that to me.
that man talks about normalizing a bulge in shorts because he's got a penis. So I'm happy to call him a man, and I'm happy that he may or may not like that, and I'm happy to have ignored him up until now. I never tweet about him. I never tweet about any of these men because I think I've got far better things to do with my time than talk about narcissistic, entitled
She's
men.
participating on
But
national
what does she get?
television.
She gets
But
something from it.
she's participating in this. She's on her knees for a
Yeah, but
guy
she's
on
so
television.
nice, though. That means she's so nice and kind and gracious and wonderful, and she probably is the best female on earth because she's so secure of her femininity and her femaleness that she can just give it all away to a very flamboyant, camp gay man. Um, it's all about her. Nobody. I don't believe in altruism, so I don't believe that anything we do, even me nearly getting crushed in that mob, that doesn't come without some personal gain. And so that her personal gain is that A, she got talked about a lot, and B, she just looks like the most kind, wonderful person on earth.
I don't know if it's a
That's,
good thing to
you know,
get talked about in a bad way.
oh,
Maybe it
she's
is
getting
in
talked
terms
about
of
though. She grew up as a
ratings.
Hollywood,
Yeah, I guess it's better
you know.
than being ignored if you were her, if you were trying to think about it the way she would think about it. But
Oh, I'm an attention seeker. I don't mind how people talk about me. I'm quite happy with attention. Like, as a small person, it's a little bit different when you're older. But as a teenager,
yeah.
as long as they were talking about me, I didn't really care what they were saying. Some people just don't grow out of that.
How much more are you going to do this for? How much longer are you going to do this?
This activism
Yeah.
till I win. Until the state gets out of this. Like, I can't force other people to give up any ideology. That's not my intention. But we cannot have a state sanctioning legal fictions like pretending that men can be women on birth certificates. And I think once we get the state out of it, I think it will dissipate anyway because it's not real. We just need the state to get out of it and schools to get out of it, and we're on our way here in the United Kingdom. You've got a lot further to go because there's so much money lining people's pockets. But yeah, we are going to get rid of it. I'm just about to run against the leader of the opposition in our next sort of parliamentary race, which the vote will be
In what party?
No, independent. My party of my own. So
Oh,
it's called the Party of Women. I just started a party that then, like the Greens, can be adopted all over the world.
The Party of Women. Wow.
Yeah, #POW, because it's all about the hashtag.
Oh.
Yeah, Party of Women, where we talk about, we return to truth. It isn't just for women, but and it's going to be very single issue. Not that we live single issue lives, but it's very much about keeping women's spaces, women's language, just for us.
All right. Well, I'll let you end on that. Where can people find you?
So I'm at standingforwomen.com. That's one of my websites, or you can go to at the Posie Parker on Twitter, where I have a nice little link tree at the top.
Cool. Well, I appreciate your talking to us, and I'm sorry about what happened to you, and I'm glad your kids are okay and your husband's fine with it. I'm glad that you're okay. You know,
Thank you.
what you do takes a toll on those around you, and they know that, which is why they do it. So thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.